We are now recording, so we got to behave. Um, all right, welcome back, everybody, to the Chaos and Coffee, or Coffee and Chaos. I forgot which way it's
One or
around.
the other, I don't know.
Anyway, Baron, how are you feeling about the league so far?
So far, so good. I wish I'd had a little bit more time to play, just personal stuff going on. But, I'm at least rolling through maps with my League Star character, and it's been pretty good. It's hard not to attach your experience of the League Star to your experience with that particular character that you start with. So I've been experimenting with a glitch. We'll probably talk about that in another question. And I've been kind of like middle of the road. I've loved a lot of the improvements that have been made. I've clearly felt some of the changes that they're making, and I still feel like there's a ways more to go. But yeah, overall, I'd put it at, like, for myself personally, 6.5, 7 out of 10. Not blown away, but that is less to do with the game and just like what I'm running, that kind of thing. How about you?
Yeah, I've had a pretty good. Like I'm on to character number 2 now, so I'm going to be running like a
Mhm.
Thorns armor break Titan that uses trample toes and wind dancer because I got lazy and just wanted to
Nice.
face tank stuff. I'm interested to see if armor is as strong as we think it might be. So, but look, the obvious stuff that we'll jump into is the campaign now feels night and day. Um, that was one of probably the biggest gripes. I think I did it in 16 hours on my league start with my Windblast character, and I can't complain with that. That's pretty good. Like, it's
Yeah. Oh yeah.
the interludes are fun. Like, except for the sword boss that minces people. I think they slightly nerfed that in the last round of patches. But as an overall, like, I think the game's like now somewhat in the right direction. Definitely things like the gem changes were a big thing, mana changes, attribute changes, all these things were great. Took away a lot of the
Yeah.
friction, and I think these were all things that we discussed in previous podcasts that needed to be addressed. So it's good to see that they actually took the feedback on page and did something with it. But
Yeah.
I guess that gets into you know our first sort of question that we're going to cover off on here, which is how do you feel about? So obviously the big token change here is the skill gem changes.
Mhm.
How are you finding the changes to skill gems now with the support gems being available for all skills?
So I'm in love with that. I've been like, I heard the concerns, the kind of trepidation people had about, like, well, it kind of like forces you, quote unquote, to make certain optimal decisions and forces you away from making suboptimal ones, which you were kind of had to do before. I think that the amount of variety and creativity that the new support gem system enables vastly outweighs anything like that. Like, sure, in my minion build, do I feel like I ought to throw something like muster and feeding frenzy on any of my minions that I want to do damage? Yeah, but like the flexibility, the ability to say, oh, my offering gets magnified effect, and my, what, my brute for his war cry gets magnified effect, and I don't have to like play that little Tetris game. It's yes, it's less variety with the support gems, but it's way more options available in terms of your main skill gems. And that's the interesting thing. Like, which main skill gems do I get to use? And this unlocks the ability to use more interesting, like, active skills. So I'm super in favor of that. Like the tiering system, there's more out there. There's interesting, like I mentioned last time, that business of making that choice going from 2 to 3. Sometimes the level 3 gem has like a drawback, and like you'd only use it in a certain circumstance. So I love that, love the variety. So that's an A+ for me. That particular portion of the changes. What about you?
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you with that one. Like, just the fact that like I can, like, I'm a big fan of armor break and armor explode right now. That's my thing because it's big, clear, and it's fun. Not necessarily the best for bossing, but um, look, it just meant like you could make any skill do what you needed to do, and even doing like the build curation video, I think community build series I'm working on, you can clearly see night and day the difference in how people are approaching builds now, and like. Candidly, it is very similar to Path of Exile 1, and that's not a bad thing because that system worked really well in Path of Exile 1. And it's sort of like like we said in the last podcast, like they tried something different, but the reality is the system they already created just works fantastically. And I feel like the amount of builds that are still to come out of like what's been changed with that gem system is unbelievable. Like, you know, who knows what we're going to see in the coming month or so as people sort of figure out more of the interactions, and also like
And
from
like, oh, go ahead.
oh no
I,
no
I was just going to say, it's not like PoE 2 doesn't take its own spin on it. Like, yes, it drew back some of the elements from PoE 1 that worked, but also in PoE 2, you've got that whole laundry list of 6 links that you're allowed to have. It's still a different and unique approach to it while retaining some of what made it good. Sorry to interrupt, but go ahead.
no, that's all good. No, no, I agree, and I think like the other thing is like just having like all like the 5 tiers of skills. The big change that I noticed was like the drop rates for like tier 2 skills come out at like the end of Act 2, as opposed to like waiting until like Act 3 and then then into the cruel acts as we were previously waiting. So I found myself getting access to a lot of support gems very early on that I needed to get my build online
Mm,
much sooner. And
nice.
just that little bit of a change, I feel, was so significant to the way that you progress through the campaign. And that's why, like, you look at the arc in the campaign as to like what it was previously, the slog that it would take like anywhere from 1.5 to 2+ hours to get through Act 1, and now you can clear it in under 1 hour, which is very similar to the clear of Path of Exile One's campaign in Act 1 initially as you start to power up. And even like lesser jewelers were dropping by the end of Act 2. So
Yeah.
like you could go to
Mhm.
Germanra with a 4 link setup and actually be able to take the boss down reasonably. So all these things were like, the gem changes were significant, I feel, and that was maybe one of the biggest feelings of friction that we had. And now that's sort of alleviated, and now you can progress and play different skills really early on. I really like that change. I think it was the right decision on their end. But
Yeah.
yeah. That takes us to, I guess, the next thing that we had coined here to talk about, which was do you think these changes have really changed the build variety overall in the game, and also the level of builds that can be approached?
I think I wish I had a better kind of bird's eye view. I've got my impression, I can look at what creators are putting out. I can look at PoE Ninja. I can scroll through Reddit, that kind of thing, and get an impression of what kind of builds. And I mean, my impression is that yes, there's decent build variety. I know that there are complaints about everybody going to, lightning arrow that I don't necessarily think that is like a shot in the heart for build variety. Like I think people are going to gravitate towards like the big meta thing, especially like I think the average Path of Exile 2 player is on the newer end. And I think that is going to kind of lean towards players who are just looking to get for something to get it done. Like I think a lot of people aren't adopting Lightning Arrow Deadeye because they want like whatever the best, flashiest, zoom, beat the ultra end game. Like they just want something that works pretty good at a low investment. Uh, so I don't necessarily think that just because a lot of players are doing one thing, I don't think that's a killer for build variety. I think if you look at some of the niche little things that people can come up with, even if they don't have a high percentage of the, like the overall player base playing them, what can you create? Yeah, I think this makes a positive difference. It just, like I said, I wish I wish I could see more. I feel like I've got a limited perspective of the number of creators that I see in my feed. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think like while people still say like there's a mixed bag of opinions around build variety, right? And obviously being one of the people that sort of covers off on curating those builds and doing the research around it, the things that I see is like obviously there are a number of builds that still work from the previous league. Um, I don't think it's accurate to say that the changes were very build limiting. Like if you're basing that on Deadeye being a predominantly played class, I think that's the wrong opinion to take with it. But yeah, opinions are subjective, right? At the end of the day, Deadeye feels like they said like 70% of the league is Deadeye initially and whatever. I think it's simply like there because number one, like it's pushed by large creators predominantly. It's like explosive shot as well, like it's very popular, especially with the whole like radial like omni explosive shot clearing maps and whatnot. I think like because they're the ones that were initially found to be really, really strong early on, people gravitate towards them because, like you said, like people are looking at getting introduced into the game, so they don't want to be barrier limited. Um, I feel like though, like in my experimentation, like Windblast Titan was exceptionally powerful. And then the weapon switch changes made huge changes to build variety. From my opinion, I think weapon switch
Hmm.
having no like switch time is one of the best
Yeah,
changes I've ever seen. And having all the automation around that and the weapon masteries, 24 points of weapon mastery, is quite lucrative. Um, I think like we've only seen like the first week of builds and what they can be, and what we'll see as time
right.
progresses is more and more and more as people sort of figure things out. I feel like things like I'm playing around with unwavering stance right now. I think armor is going to really lead into more builds becoming available. And for those who don't know, the armor changes are quite significant that from a defense standpoint. Like that conversion now that you can get on gear to be able to deal with elemental damage, that's a night and day difference to how armor feels in the end game. You couple that with the changes to block, and you could potentially make, you know, immortal characters very easily, which is what I'm playing around with right now with big AoE. I think like
Love that.
yeah, exactly. And I think like gone are the days where like or like we're starting to get to the point where people can choose between a defensive playstyle or an offensive playstyle. So obviously, like if you're playing Lightning Arrow, you get hit by a stiff breeze and you're done. But like
Yeah.
my builds, if you're playing like 30 or 40,000 armor, you get hit by, you know, a truck, you're gonna walk away going, "Hey, that felt like a bee sting." And I think that's the right direction for the game. And I think this will change even more as we see classes like Templar come in and Druid. Like build
Mm.
variety is a really loaded question right now because we're missing like half the ascendancies and classes.
And the ones
Which
we're missing in large, you're missing a strength class, a strength based class. You're missing both strength int classes, aren't we? We're missing
mm,
both Templar and Druid.
yep.
So like three of the four classes that are going to have strength associated with them aren't even there. So
we
totally agree with you
we
on
don't
that.
even have Marauder. Like the Juggernaut's still probably on
Exactly.
its way in. Like you know that there's an ascendancy that I'm playing with in the tree right now where Mace Strike has AOE built into the strike skill, right? And it's actually not too bad. And like these are all the things that are changing in the game. And I guess like and this is a really like this isn't a toxically positive take on it, but I think where it's moving from at this point with the way that this patch feels is in an exceptionally good position to be one of like and we always said this in the past, so we want the game to succeed, and I feel like the changes they've made, void of the negative noise that is always out there and the hate mobs and all the rest of it, is the game is finally moving in the direction that it should move in. And we come back to the question of, you know, we don't want it to be Path of Exile 1. We want it to be Path of Exile 2 and different to Path of Exile 1, but we want it to be a good Path of Exile game, not some like weird Dark Souls sort of thing going on. And I feel like they're moving away from that. And with these changes means like builds are going to really focus around like farming league mechanics as opposed to just boss killing with one shot. And specialization for league mechanics is I feel like, you know, where I'm going with my builds is more like I just want to farm rituals and then make bank on
Nice. Yeah,
farming
yeah,
them. Yeah. But I feel
yeah.
like that's where build variety is going, and we haven't even seen real build diversity yet because, like I said, you know, traps aren't even added to the game. We don't have axes or
I
swords,
know.
like you know, friggin'
And like I try to put
retail.
myself in the mindset like in my head, my instinct is to go, oh, axes and swords, that's just kind of like more melee, kind of in the same vein. And I'm trying to remind myself, no, in Path of Exile 2, they're really diversifying the type of skill by weapon type so that like a mace skill is going to have very little in common with a sword skill or an axe skill. And so when those things get added, it's not just adding like kind of a visual shell or overlay with maybe one or two new skills. Like that's like a whole new branch to explore. So yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
exactly. And like you're going to be able to play like what was it pugilist assassins and things like that, which are yeah, a gladiator that punches stuff with a shield like potentially could be awesome. I reckon face breakers will make its way back in with the marauder and stuff like that as those classes like when the Zerker comes
That'd
in.
be
So
nice.
But
Facebreaker is one of my first major builds in PoE one, so that'd be
I
great.
think everybody's run a face breakers build at this stage. It's just like one of those things you have to do at a certain point. You're like, I'm going face breakers. For those who don't know what
Yep.
face breakers is, it's unarmed and it just scales like flat physical melee damage and crit based on your unarmed position and flat damage on your
So
crit.
wait. Does Hollow Palm in PoE two require you to not have gloves, or can you currently have
No,
gloves
you need
with
to have
Hollow
you
Palm?
got to have gloves. This is something I covered off on in I think a stream,
So
and yeah, so you got to have gloves, and
you
it's
know that in PoE one, the thing that prevents it from being totally insane is that for Hollow Palm, you can't even be wearing gloves. So Facebreakers is
exactly.
a pair of gloves. Obviously, if you could wear Facebreakers and have Hollow Palm technique, it'd be busted as shit. They'll have to finagle something if they want to introduce
They'll
Facebreakers,
have
so
to
it's
be a
not
pretty
crazy.
big downside for that one because I'll be abusing it straight away on the warrior. I'll be like, well, we're gonna go punch stuff to death. But
Yep.
that gets us
And
to attributes and mana. So obviously a big change that came in was attributes and mana. Have you noticed this when you've been playing through?
I would say regarding attributes, for me, there's this phrase notable by its absence kind of a thing, where if I look back and I'm like, all right, how have the attributes been? I sit here and I think to myself, I haven't really thought much about attributes at all. Maybe once or twice if I had to like rejig a couple things, but I never had to go and like get a big amulet with 40 strength on it or whatever. And I think just by virtue of the fact that I haven't had to focus a lot on it, that's already a big difference. That was never true for any of my builds. Now the mana thing is tough for me because I'm actually probably the worst qualified to talk about that because I league started a lich where the first ascendancy node I took was the one that drains your mana. So obviously, like the whole mana situation is whack there. And then the second ascendancy point I took was the one that effectively solves mana permanently by making regen based on your life. So like I went from like pretty on mana to fine and no problems on mana. So I can't really tell on that one. I bet it helped, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I was the same opinion. Like for warrior, I've stopped going blood magic because I found I could sustain large attack skills and things like that with mana itself, which is a really good change because like that was one of the things that annoyed me the most about the game where it's like you have a skill that the mana cost is greater than your entire pool of mana is wild. Like that's
Yeah.
insane. So I'm not seeing that at this stage. Like it makes sense the mana cost for like running Hammer of the Gods because like potentially you're gonna like one hit something with that or like two hit something with Hammer of the Gods. So like from my position, I think the mana changes are good. From the attribute standpoint, I don't find like I played a Dex stave build on a warrior and I did that with no problems whatsoever. So and I haven't had anyone that's responded to my build guides that have been like, oh, I'm really struggling to balance it. So I feel like
Yeah.
it's right at that point where it needs to be. But that, like with more tuning, it'll get better and better. But I don't feel like I'm having to run like the runes in gear to try and just get my attributes just over the line to be able to run a skill now. And I feel like eventually, like they'll just remove those runes and go, no, you don't need them anymore. You just be able to find the attributes and skill and then replace them out with
I'm
probably
glad they introduced them. I'm
yeah.
glad that as a stopgap, like we needed them at the time, and then I'm also glad that they took another pass. Like, yeah, I've got no problem with them existing until and unless they figure out, like, all right, literally nobody's using these attributes are fine. But yeah, I didn't find myself using a single one. I was using resistance runes were my like kind of early stopgap runes were resistances.
Sorry, took a swig and it went down the
You
wrong
gonna make
way.
it?
Yeah, I'm gonna survive. I'm gonna get there. Oh, I'm going cherry red. Um, yeah, no, I found the same thing. I think like as they sort of get more into the position of like the initial design of the game was to make it so that anybody could pick up the game and make a build right, and I feel like they're starting to get to that point. Like builds sort of scale pretty well. I'm starting to really think like builds scale better in Path of Exile 2 than Path of Exile 1 now. Um, and like, some of the other stuff is like the, whether or not you agree with the combo system. I know that's probably a controversial topic. Um,
I'm gonna get to that in my take may surprise people, but go on.
yeah, I think like, yeah, the combo system's an interesting one, but in the absence of that, I think if it becomes where attributes are not a huge thing, if it's like balancing like what you're missing by one strength and you got to make a choice to adjust a couple things or like recraft something now. I think that's a good spot. That's basically where PoE 1 got in the very end, where like you weren't trying to find like 50 life, 50 strength. You're trying to find like 4 or 3 strength here or there to balance it out. And that's the difference between your skills being able to be activated and not being activated. I feel like that's a good end point for that. And that sort of gets us to we'll talk about the combo system at the end as a bonus question. I think
Yeah,
that's a good
well,
one to.
I'm going to wrap mine up into my my League Star character progression. I had a little note about
Oh,
that, but we can go to we can talk crafting if you
yeah.
want.
Let's get into crafting. So how have you been feeling about the abyss crafting and the changes to crafting overall?
I got this feeling of deja vu, nothing's new under the sun, where I got the same sensation that I got with Harvest back in the day, where for a player who's just like able to log in for an hour or two a day, or maybe the newer players who are able to play more but don't have quite yet the experience with the game, the Abyss crafting is really a great step up. And like it gives you a feeling of agency early on that kind of carries over with you, and like yes, you can progress that to get more and more complex and expensive, but even from the first time that you pick up one of these preserved jawbones or whatever, you can say like, oh, I do have a pair of boots that they've got good resistances in life. Maybe I can throw, one of these currencies at it and see if I can hit a movement speed or whatever, or maybe I can try to hit an attack on a bow or whatever. And so, like, I feel like it's nice. It gives you agency early on, but I have seen the complaints already start to arise, even a week into the league, where people are like, "Oh, it's too much. It's too much borrowed power. They're gonna have to take it away." And it's basically an item editor in the end game. And I'm always like, it's an item editor if you put a lot of time and effort and thought and knowledge and currency into it. And like, then it just becomes, we've already established, like, yes, the item editor exists, but like, how much, how much effort and currency can go into it before you're like, all right, that's acceptable. Like,
Mm.
because there's always been item editors if you're willing to throw 57 Hinakora's locks at a thing. So like, it's, the question is not like, can you get a perfect item for an expensive amount of money? That's always been the case. You could do that. The question is, where is the line? And at a week into the league and me not being super progressed into the end game, I don't have a good take on whether or not this is over the line and this is too much power or whatever. I'm inclined to say probably not, but I don't know. I've enjoyed it for what I've done with it so far. How about you?
Yeah, look, I think the pardon me. I think the perception here is like when you look at streamers who play for like 20 hours a day or whatever they play for, right? So it's probably you know, overstatement of hours there.
At league start, maybe, but
Yeah.
even after league start, you have people playing all day. Sure.
Oh, exactly. And like for anyone that you see that's doing that master crafting sort of tact, it's like they're putting hours into the game, right? I feel like for the amount of hours you invest into the game, the crafting system is pretty reasonable. Like it's not over the top. It has some really good mods that come out and it's really good early power. And then like a lot of it is like the only really complaint I have about it right now is the fact that the omens don't have sockets in the like ritual area in the stash
Agree.
tabs.
In
That
the stashes,
it's
yeah.
annoying, right? But outside of that, like that's
Yeah.
really the only gripe. Like we still have to farm the omens. The omens aren't that like cheap to get in the first place. Some of them are very expensive, which means you have to consistently play. The problem that people
Mhm.
always run to is they like compare themselves to like what the tier one streamers are doing. Bearing in mind, like the everyday people like you and me, we're working full-time jobs, so we don't get that sort of time where we can just like infinitely play the game. So our progression to be able to get that crafting material is going to be significantly less than somebody who's slogging 20 hours a day and just non-stop farming. And it means your
And
build.
for the record, I want to say like this is, I am not in any way taking a shot at those individuals, whether
No,
you are a
neither am
streamer
I.
or you're just a player who's able to play that often. Like, I'm jealous. Hey, that's great. I mean,
I wish I
that's
could do
awesome.
I wish I could do that too. Like it's
Absolutely.
not a jab. It's just basically saying that the reality is that like when you look at people
Yeah.
doing it's content, right? So like they've got the time, they've got the the capacity to be able to do that, but most players are not going to have the capacity. So I think nerfing systems in a video game based on what people who have time to invest in are doing is not the right outcome. I think the way that it is, void a few tweaks, probably a change to the overall like stat pools. I think those are valid changes, but I think gutting it isn't the right answer. And
Right.
people who
And
are
here's the counter argument that's always presented, and I want to counter the counter before it even comes up. Is they say, look, I agree, but Path of Exile's got an open economy, so if you allow these tools in that benefit the super, 20-hour day or whatever exaggeration we want to make, the super hardcore players, um, if you let that in the game, then they're going to dominate the economy and they're going to make it worse for the casual player. Like it has downstream effects. And I say, yes, agree with a caveat. The caveat being that it is always going to be the case that the people who can put that amount of time into the game will have some advantage. So the question we need to ask is not whether the new crafting system offers them an advantage over newer players, people who can't play as often, whatever. That'll always be the case. The question is, in that kind of like, does it become a logarithmic thing? Like, does it give them such an advantage that it is like multiplicatively or logarithmically more of an advantage than simply the one that they already have, where they can put a boatload of time into the game, buy up materials and whatever, and like that's always going to be the case. So if the crafting system just allows them to do that kind of at the same general percent better than the average player, then I think that the problem there is an illusion. I don't think it exists. I think it's just
yeah.
you could take away the power and they would still have the ability to make a mirror to your item. So yeah.
Yeah, it's always going to exist in any game that you play. Like Call of Duty, there's going to be someone there that plays 24 hours a day. Yeah, Battlefield 6 when it comes out, there's going to be someone at level 100 in the first week somehow, but they're going to find a way, especially with the map creator. The reality is like if you nerf absolutely everything based on what the few do to impact the many, then you're going to erode the experience for the many at the very end of the day. So I don't think just nerfing absolutely everything because you see a few we call it outliers in statistics, right? So like a few outliers are not indicative of the whole population. And so like, now and again you'll sample an outlier or throw your opinion out, which is called a skewing. The reality is like usually you extract those out, but if the system's working for like the many on at the generic level, at a homogenous level, everybody with the same sort of advantages and whatnot, and so at the same level, then really like those few, let them have their time to do whatever they want, but everybody else is going to benefit from the system either way. But pulling it down is just going to end up in a point two nerf scenario where people are going to then say, well, this is rubbish now, and it's then gonna then swing in the opposite direction and hurt the game. So I think where it's at right now, I'm pretty happy with it. Like I like the idea. I
Yeah.
think it's fun. Like yeah,
Listen, whenever I encounter something in the game or like anywhere, this is just like the way I approach things, my mindset. If there's something that I don't like or I'm not experiencing well, it's difficult for me or it's unpleasant for me. I'm always thinking to myself, why is this happening? Is this happening because I'm doing something wrong? Because there's something wrong with the game? Because the economy is skewed towards those top end players, whatever. And I think about it every time. And I have not yet, maybe there's something I'm missing, but I've not yet come across an instance in PoE 2 where I go to myself, oh, I'm having a bad time with X because these, expletives up at the top are doing this and screwing me. Like that hasn't cascaded down to me. You look at the economy. Why is the economy that I just dropped 2 divine orbs in the last 24 hours and they're not worth as many exalts? Well, it's because now that GG have fixed the mapping system so that prefixes and suffixes both come with upsides and downsides, you have more incentive to exalt a map. Exalts are worth more. It's not that divines are worth less because, some idiot up at the top is screwing me. No, it's just the design of the game and we all adapt to it. And the things that I want to buy are worth exalts now. So that's fine. Yeah.
I remember in PoE 1 when exalts were like the main currency before divines, and
Yeah.
then like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
exalts went from like 120 chaos down to like 10 or 15 chaos, and that
15.
that was the
Yeah.
high
But
sleeve
I
of
mean,
the
that was a big Yeah, that was a big shift that they made deliberately. Like that was a balance shift that they made.
Yeah, exactly. But it happens every league. Economies ebb and flow, and that's how it operates.
Yep.
But yeah, this gets us to the next question of how did your own league start and character progression go? So how was your first character this league, Baron?
You sure you don't want to go first on this one? I've been going first on all these. Why don't you go ahead?
Oh, okay, I'd go for look. I had a good league start. My Windblast character just chonked through maps as like I did league start testing, so I knew it was going to work either way. It just worked a lot better than I
Yeah.
anticipated. I didn't feel any of the issues. The sword guy was probably the only one that was sort of a little bit hard, but like I really invested faith into armor, and I think my investment paid off. My character's not like the tankiest character, nor is it taken down like T4 pinnacles or whatever right now, but it takes down pinnacles nonetheless. I just don't, yeah, I didn't play that part of the game so much in previous patches because the game just, candidly did not feel as good as what it feels now. So I'm more wanting to invest as the main game for my channel now, over even PoE 1. I think the game actually feels better than PoE 1 in certain areas. Yeah, and I've been quite critical about certain things and elements of the game, and it's good to see the feedback taken on board and adjusted. But yeah, my first character went really well. Second one's going really well as well. But how about you? How's yours been?
Yeah, so I decided, and for once was actually able to stick to what I decided. I was going to do a minion army type lich before league start, and I did. And always had the mindset of like, I'm going to play with a full minion army style. I'll play with, experiment with like specific specters, maybe experiment with storm mages, this and that. And I did, and it went pretty well. The business that I was talking about with combo gameplay and kind of an unexpected outcome was I was like, minions are the one thing I think that grinding gear games have like slipped into the soup here for me that it makes me willing to press a few buttons because I think the difference is the reason that I'm willing to press like my skeletal brute to do a war cry and my arsonist to blow up the gas clouds and do like 3 4 different buttons is because there's a baseline level of damage that if I sat back and did nothing, it would be doing bad damage, but it would still be doing damage. And each button that I press is not enabling me to do something at all. It's not like I have to set up bing bang boom and set this up and then slam and then I get my damage. No, it's a each little thing that I do stepwise improves the damage. And that, to me, apparently, I don't know if I could have predicted this, but that apparently is enough to make me feel not too bad about having to press several buttons in combat. Now, I'm still trying to, edge towards a combat style where I'm only pressing one, maybe two, other than a boss. But at the moment, I've settled on what everybody else has settled on, which is the nettle ant specters, these crazy what Gazzy's calling the cocaine ants, not without good reason, I suppose. They're and what that name indicates about them is actually super indicative of an important factor that I don't know if their damage scaling is as good as like the Vol guards, where you have these overlapping explosions and shotgunning is always
Yeah.
really powerful in PoE. But I tried the Vol guards, and what makes the nettle ants so much better is their behavior.
Mm.
Frankly, it's if all specters or all minions had the aggro range and the speed of like just rushing up to the enemies and being in their face like these guys do, I don't know if they've got numerically the best damage, but they feel the best because they actually go out and do something. Whereas your Volguards, they sit in the backfield and they kind of like lob these things, and it takes a second and a half to explode, and like it's a big difference. So yeah, it feels pretty good. I wish I could have played more so that I could tell you more about like how the late mapping experience feels with them, but so far it's been fun.
Yeah, I
It's
think
good.
that's the key word. Like the game is moving the direction away from friction, but to fun. So it's like going
Yep.
from one F to the other F, which I like. Like, yeah, my opinion of the game improved drastically this league because that's what I started to feel with progressing different builds, and now I want to experiment and get different skills working. And Iron Ward seems like a lot of fun, but you got to take a lot of damage to make it work. But yeah, but that brings us to the next question, I guess, which is the new story material. So obviously Act 4 and the interludes was added. Like my personal take here is I think they're fantastic. And
Yes.
I sort of like the themology that they're going with it. Like, you know, the Krui Islands was pretty good. I feel like progressing it's really good. Did you notice something in the island of Kin? I'm going to do a video on it.
The island of what? My audio cut out.
The island of Kin. The island of Kin is a sulfite. The sulfite island. There's actually
I noticed.
there's a note
Good
from an NPC that's very important. And there's an
from Nico.
area, yep, and there's an area that looks like it's incomplete, which means yeah, we're getting it.
Come
It's
on.
coming. It's coming.
Listen, the moment that I saw that there was a sulfite island, I'm like,
Oh
you
yeah.
don't put that in to fuck around. Like it's coming.
Yeah,
That's
it's in dev. I reckon it'll be in the next 2 or 3 patches. It'll be coming into the game. That's all I'm going to play. I don't care about everything else. Fuck everything else. I will only play
what are they going to have to do to delve to make it feel sufficiently different than the mapping system? Unless they completely redo the mapping system, which is its own separate thing.
I'm hoping they don't like drastically change it, but like there's still be some changes they need to make. But like it needs to keep the same essence of what it was, and I feel like
I in the past I have said that just my like creator like what would I do if I was making I was like all right, if you want to keep the map system the same, have delve be more interactive with it, have it be like a layer underneath where you're going to nodes in the same way that you go to nodes in delve now,
mm,
and I don't know, have it interact with the map up top somehow. I don't know how, like there are entry points or something, I don't care, but like I feel like there's thematic cool ways that you could, if you want to keep the mapping system the way it is where it already kind of feels like delve, okay, lean into that. Don't make it weird and awkward that you have these two kind of similar feeling mechanics. Make it make sense. Like have it be like delve is actually underneath ray class this whole time. I don't know, I
yeah,
think it could be cool.
yeah, I think it's cool. But yeah, I guess like has like what's your take on it? There's some definitely some notable areas in the new missions.
I thought it was great. Obviously, more and more, and it's so easy for people to take this as a negative, and I don't. I take it as a positive. More and more in Act 4, you see how like a lot of what was being introduced in Path of Exile, sure you could call it like a testing ground for Path of Exile 2, or you could look at it as the positive that I see it as, which is that they were introducing this lore as a baseline so that when you get to Path of Exile 2, it feels more complete. The world feels more connected and lived in and stuff where you're getting the trial of the ancestors. I'm seeing these familiar rooms with Hinakora and stuff. I'm getting the lore behind it. Meeting all these characters. So love that. Let's see what else. What I really loved. Can we? I mean, like, how spoilery can we get? I'll rein in the spoilers a little
Go
bit here, but
go
like,
crazy.
like there's the one quest that you do in Act 4 with a person who is trapped, and you're immediately like, I don't know, like if you're paying any attention at all, you're immediately suspicious of this person. Like, you can't remember that? That's weird. You should be able to remember that. So like, that shit is gonna get whack when you free this person. Like you're like, all right, there's gonna be something bad is gonna happen when I free this person. I don't know if I expected it to be who it was when we released. Do you remember what I'm
I
talking
know the
about?
one you're talking about.
Uh,
Yeah, I know. Yep.
yeah. I just, for anybody who hasn't played that section yet, especially if you're a Path of Exile 1 player, like, I don't want to ruin the surprise for you, but like, when that happened, I was like, oh, yeah, we're back. Anyways, same with, I told you when we were talking ascendancies on like the second podcast we ever did, I told you that if I ever heard Izzaro's voice again, and this is a separate thing, I was going to lose my shit. Well, I was streaming when you read the plaque. I think it's in Act 4. Yeah, it's in Act 4, where you hear Izzaro's voice in like the trial of justice or whatever. I was like, oh, it's him. We're back, baby. I don't know if they're ever gonna like actually reintroduce him to the game, but just getting the voice actor back,
I think it'll be Act
love it.
4. There's another throwback. So you know when you take on the boss with the spear with the like big ballistas, right?
Yes, yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
So there's a voice line there where he's like, even Azaro couldn't like bring me down or whatever. And there's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
references to Azaro. I still think they're gonna add a fourth lab, and I think it's gonna be Azaro. It would make sense.
I would love it.
there's 4 ascendancies, right? It would make sense that Azaro is the last lab that they would add. I really hope they do go that direction, because having Eternal Lab added back in, like I think we discussed it like many months ago now.
Yeah. Oh, we did. I'm going down the rabbit hole of thinking like, all right, the
Orieth.
final act. So like, let me ask you this: what if Act 6 is going to be Orieth, and the end of Act 4 has us setting up to go to Orieth? What the hell are we doing in between?
Well,
Because the interludes.
I think Act 5 will be Orieth. Isn't Act 5's Orieth?
Oh, okay. You may be right. I just thought I remember. So maybe Act 6 is after Orieth, whatever happens, because like the end game is like, you can tell we're in a beta because the end game is being pretty spoilery with like how the game is going to end. Like,
Well,
uh,
Act 6 is going to be fighting. I reckon it'll be Kitava, because that's what the corrupted thing is probably going to allude to. Like that's going to be
that
Kitava.
would be amazing.
It
That
would
would
be
be amazing.
it would be ironic that they put the same endgame boss into the game as, and that will be the final like real pinnacle boss in the game. That'll be like the big daddy Mac of Path of Exile 2 will be the Kitava fight, and it'll be like
That'd be
some
crazy.
wild fight that like we've never seen before. But I reckon that's,
Anyway,
yeah, speculation, but I think that's where it's going to go.
I was just thinking about where was the capital of the empire that Izaro, like, was it in Orieth? Was it
Yeah,
based out of Orieth? I don't know enough,
yeah.
because if it was, that would be perfectly thematic. You do your trial, your first trial, Sekimas. You're doing it in the desert where the Sekimas are from. The second trial, you come across in Act 3 the Utsal, the trial, trial of chaos thing, and then Act 4 it's going to be the trial of the ancestors. So yeah, the perfect trial for Orieth would be Izaro.
If you
Come on, let's do it.
if you look at it too from like game design choices, right? So you would have the trial systems balance. So I think the trial systems have been unbalanced by deliberate nature to try and make them harder than what they should be, but also because like the future trials were never meant to be as difficult as the first two trials when they were escalated to higher difficulties. I think
That's
they,
what we've talked about before.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think they
I agree.
artificially throttled the difficulty to fill the gap, but they were never intended to be like that. So I think
I
like,
hope.
yeah, exactly. And I feel like, the trial 3 will be commensurate with the level that you're at. And then the final trial will be just before level 70 to like 70, whatever that is when you finish the campaign. I feel like that trial would make a lot of sense to be able to give you the next trial point. And then that would give you the power to progress into the end game. And like thinking from like the design methodology they're going with here, that would make sense for the way the game's sort of pitched to be. Like get through the campaign, do the trials as part of the campaign, and not make it like
Hmm.
that would be very similar to PoE 1 as well. Um, or
Yep.
maybe the same scenario where, in mapping you have to pursue after Izaro, similar to like Path of Exile 1. Like I like the idea of the irony of that being the final ascendancy point is the Eternal Lab and the return of Izaro or whatever, or the Crypt of
Big
Izaro.
callback.
Yeah, I feel like that's the right direction for them overall. But so that gets us to trade market. What's your feel?
Yeah, I've loved it. I've loved it. This is, listen, for all those years when we said we wish we had an in-game trade market, this is doing what I wanted it to do.
Yep,
I've played with it a ton. I've had people like, this is one of the things I've been able to do the most of because it's asynchronous and because I can log off and it's still there.
yep.
People have bought from me. I have bought from people. A plus. I would say people should watch Sir Gog's video about the different insidious little ways that people can still mess with this, even though it looks like a system that would be hard to like trick somebody with. There's still little things that people can do to kind of screw you over, and so like be aware of that. Not everybody out there is a pro bono actor. Some people out there to take advantage of your, if not greed, your desire to get a good deal. Let's say. So just take a look at Sir Gog's video. It's worth a look, but like being aware of that. I think that overall it's been awesome. I've been able to get what I want. There was always this kind of low level annoyance with the trade system, even like going to click, send message for the first time, you'd get this like buildup of annoyance already, this pre-annoyance, knowing like there's only a 20% chance this person's even going to respond to me, and that's gone. If I want it to be, like, I can go over, if I don't want to pay gold, I can go over to the traditional trade market. But if I just want the smoothness of like, no, I'm just going to go get the item, I can do it. I can go buy Jin barriers or however you pronounce it for the trials. Like, I can just go get it. I don't have to worry about messaging somebody for a one exalt item that they're, if they're mapping, they're not going to respond to that. Big win there. I totally appreciate this one's kind of flown under the radar, I think, because of how the asynchronous market has kind of dominated people's thoughts about it. But the inclusion of uncut skill gems on the currency exchange is enormous for progression, for fiddling around with new characters, for just like fine tuning stuff. So big wins on trade. I'm having trouble thinking of any downsides. How about you?
It's like just being able to go and get those one elk item uniques that you need to test out a
Yes.
build.
Yes.
Like you don't have
Yes.
to like message 20 people and then go, bugger it, I gotta go up to 2 chaos and 3 chaos and 10
Right.
chaos. And then by the end you're paying 1 divine for an item just because of
I've
convenience to
done
go
it.
get it. Yep, we've
I've done
all
it to test that new character. Yep.
exactly. So like all of that stuff is gone. I can't wait for it to make its way into POE 1 because it'll be in the 3.27 patch. And yeah, like
Oh my god.
it's gonna be game changer.
It's
It's
gonna be
like
amazing. It's gonna
offline
be so
currency
good.
generation, offline currency generation. Like who could
Oh
complain
my
with that?
god.
You just come back. Oh, here's 50x or whatever divine. Like no mucking around. And then the ability to then go, hey, they got some pretty good other items that I wouldn't have looked for if I didn't see it here.
Yeah.
I think that's like they
I
really
love the
nailed it.
flavor of going to somebody's shop and like fiddling around. I haven't bought anything yet from just like looking around somebody's shop, but I like to see what other people are selling and like what they're pricing things at.
Yeah.
It's like, look, technically, that information was technically all available on the trade site before. Like, but this kind of puts it in a nice little convenient window, and just it feels like you're in that person's shop,
Yeah.
kind of a thing. I don't know. It's nice.
I think it's good. It's just a convenience, and the big sell here is like if you're working and you don't have the time and you don't want to muck around, you don't want to wait for someone to come online, you just go bing bang boom, straight in,
And like,
done.
even if you do have the time, who wants to spend it doing that? I'd rather spend it playing the game. Let me back out there. Like, I don't want to spend an hour just like typing in it. Like, my trades are taking fractions of the time now.
Yep.
It makes me play the game more.
It actually means you can just like blast maps, experiment. It's part of the fun. Is just all the quality of life that comes with this, and it's like you don't realize how bad the like for us we've been playing Path of Exile for like nearly a decade. So you don't realize how bad the old system actually is until you use this consistently, and then you realize, yeah, I can't go back to that old system. It makes me
I'll
want to
cop
play
to
PoE
like
more.
I was aware of how bad the old system was, but I just like consciously tamped down on it. Like it's worth it. Like the other elements of the game are good enough that it's worth it. But
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's just the difference is night and day.
Console
It's so much
players,
better.
big advantage for console players as well, like
Yeah.
massive advantage. And the big thing is like you're not going to get into a stupid argument with somebody over some trivial crap because they're trying to rip pardon me, they're trying to rip you off or something like that. Like the amount of times I've had like stupid arguments with people and they're like, I'm reporting you and rah rah rah. It's like, what is wrong with you, bro? Like, go away.
None of that.
No, none
Yeah.
of that. Just gets rid of all of it. Um, and that gets us to so sprint is the next one we have to talk about here. Um, like I'm playing an unwavering stance build, so like I don't think it's bad. I think sprint's really good. There was
How has
definitely
Unwavering Sense been interacting with it for you? I haven't played around with that yet.
you don't sprint. You don't dodge roll, you don't sprint. I think I was on the stream the
Okay.
other night. I was like, ah, Jonathan and his stupid dodge roll and sprint, get out of here. Like, I was like, we play unwavering stance. We tank everything. And that's the best part about the league so far is you can do that. But
If you want.
exactly. I personally really like I think it's pretty funny when you get like pushed over. It's like and then you just like fall over and face plant. I think it's hilarious. But what about you? How's your feel been with it?
I am trying to think about it from the developer's perspective, and I'm trying to adapt my own expectations to it because the initial frustration and irritation that I had with it, like, don't get me wrong, my overall experience with it has been good, but my frustration with it has been mostly in the occasions where I'll be moving between packs, and my instinct is to sprint. That is when you would activate a Quicksilver Flask if it wasn't already active in PoE1. Like if you hadn't set up your, your instilling orbs to automate your flasks yet, you would, okay, done with the pack. I've regenerated my flask charges by killing all those guys. Now I'm going to hit my Quicksilver Flask and get to the next pack. And that's kind of like a manual habit that's been hard to break. My hands like want to go do that, and they don't want you to do that. Clearly, the next pack is typically close enough that by the time you do that dodge roll and start rolling, suddenly you're at the next pack and you've got to stop anyways. And so like that's taken some getting used to, and I understand why they would want to do it that way. They want, like, if the next pack is close enough that you could have just walked over to it, they want you to just walk over to it and use the sprinting for like covering long distances. It's tough. Like, I don't know if I should complain and say like, no, just let us sprint wherever. Like, don't make me dodge roll first. Let me just run. Or if that's some, from the dev's perspective, is that some give them an inch and they'll ask for a mile kind of a thing. Like they've already made a huge concession by even including sprint, and it is good for what it's been. It took some adaptation during the campaign to remember that I should be using it during some stretches. Like I would catch myself being like, man, this area is long. Ah, shit, there's a sprint now. Like you just kind of get in the flow, but I think I'm used to it now. I don't mind the knockdown being punishing. What I do wish is that the self-directed stoppages in motion, I wish those were a little more forgiving. Like I still feel like I'm coming to a dead stop whenever I need to like turn too sharp of a turn, or if I want to like turn around because I realize I'm at a dead end. I feel like I have to grind to a stop, dodge roll again, and then start it again. That's a little clunky, but hopefully that's something they can smooth out, because I think overall the experience is good.
Yeah, I think the wall collision is probably very problematic.
Yeah,
That
I'm not in. Yeah,
Yeah, that one's just like there's a lot of like single narrow pass corridors that they put into the game where like it currently just like you hit a wall literally. You're like bonk, and then you're like, oh, there's a
there are
wall.
some maps and campaign areas where you just don't sprint
Yeah,
ever. Yeah, because like e- even if you had a straightaway, like even the slightest deviation, and you're going to hit the side of the wall, and then even when you get to the end of that hall, whether it's left, right, wherever, like you're not going to be able to turn that sharp, and you're going to hit a wall. Yeah, in those situations, like if there are whole areas of the game where the sprint mechanic is turned off for, that's a problem.
yeah,
Something needs to change there.
yeah. I think like in fights, it's not a bad mechanic to like get away and dodge stuff and things like that. I've definitely used it in a few boss fights, especially in Act 2 when you fight the fire guy at the very start, and those at the Mudwa or whatever area. But yeah, I think it's a good include. I think like it's one of those like compromises where like they're giving you something. It's not quite there yet, but it's better than nothing. And it definitely
Oh
makes
yeah.
the game feel better.
For
Um,
anybody who hasn't experienced this yet, just a quick note that like it makes some of the Sekima trials a joke. Like the escape trials, you
yeah,
just don't have to care about the monsters there
yeah,
anymore. You
yeah,
just ignore them.
yeah. It's definitely some game balance, but I think that's yeah. Let's not flag that one to attention. Let's leave that because I like the escape trials. um, all right, so balance changes. Whirling slash is obviously it got nerfed. There are a few other things that got a little bit nerfed. What's your feel for this? Mid patch nerfs a thing, or should they leave it broken?
Admittedly, this is one that I approach as kind of like an anthropologist from the outside, because I try. Here's the thing. It would be easy to assume that I'm a hipster for not wanting to play like the meta build. I don't think of it that way. If that's PoE 1, sure, you call me a hipster if you want. In PoE 2, the reason that I try not to play whatever the thing of the moment meta build is because PoE 2 is not a solved game. Even PoE 1 is not really a solved game, truly. But like PoE 2, there's still so much out there that like experimenting could be the next big thing. You don't know what you're going to find. So I only gravitate away from doing the lightning arrows and the whirling slashes and stuff because I I just want to see what else is out there, and maybe I'll come across something cool. With that said, so like I said, I'm approaching it from the outside. I don't have the experience of having been playing a thing and have it be nerfed. Like I'm not one of the whirling slash players who put a bunch of time into it and then it gets taken away. So I can't speak to that. I'm sure that would have been very frustrating to be in those shoes. And I hope for their sake that there is something that they could pivot to without too high of a gold cost. But to the people who say, "Oh, what? Why did you do that to whirling slash when you wouldn't to lightning arrow?" Two responses. Number one, maybe they should do that to lightning arrow. Maybe the result is not that they shouldn't have done it to whirling slash, but that they should also feel free to do it with others. But like, I actually don't know. Again, not having played it, if lightning arrow is enough of a problem to warrant that, or if it is, again, like we talked about, more of this social thing where it's quite good, not broken good, just quite good, and a lot of people are pushing it. It may very well be that it's well and truly busted and is stifling build diversity or whatever because everybody wants to play that. If so, great. Then I'm all in favor of people who say mid league nerf it. I think we're still in open access, and for all of GGG's talk about how they want to treat it a bit more like a full release because of the popularity, when you're really going to have to treat it as a full release is when you full release it. So right now, you still, other than that free weekend, you're still dealing with players who bought this or had somebody buy it for them so that they could try it out because they are enthusiastic. Now is the time to kind of fiddle with the dials a little bit more than you might in a full release. I say if you need to nerf something, do it. And if you need to buff something, do that too. Like don't be afraid to fiddle with the dials a little bit. The whirling slash thing. So I never actually played it. What is it? This is the business where you kind of like what you hop around with whirling slash
Yeah.
and you can go really fast, but you have to click a lot, don't
Yeah,
you?
it's got like ultra
Back
speed
when
and
you
you're like and it's faster
yeah
than sprint at the end of the day. And then you let out a
yeah
heap of like whirlwinds and it just blows bosses up in one shot. Um, the big thing for me is like I don't think it's interesting playing the meta. I think the meta exists for a reason and it's there for people who just want to like blast Endgame and want like a build that's like, oh, this will work. Like Lightning Arrow's worked every single like that. I always call them cardinal builds. So like Lightning Arrow will work probably every single league to varying degrees. They did sort of nerf it in PoE one at one point, and then it was still heavily played. It used to be like Wind Ripper builds were a big thing for a very long time for currency generation. Like, they used to
oh
use
yeah
Burial Grounds Wind Rippers. Like, there's always some sort of meta. I have never felt intrigued by wanting to play the meta. And like you said, like PoE 2 is a new game. Like, more power to you. If that's the build you want to play and min max and follow a guide and a creator, you should do it if that's what you will find fun with. I personally don't think it's fun, and I don't feature metas on my channel as a general rule of thumb. I feature consistent builds or interesting builds because I find them to be more fun. And part of that is understanding new mechanics and different mechanics. So then you can apply that to the creation of furtherment of new builds. And right now, like PoE 2 is just in its infancy. So we haven't found all the broken interactions. And like PoE 1, like we have found most things. Like there is rarely a new build that pops up, and it will pop up from time and time again. But PoE 2, we have an incomplete product, and basically builds are open slather. Like you can do whatever you want. The big advantage of the way the game is currently sort of going down the design route of it's very much like starting to move in the last epoch route with point 3, where you can take any skill, and as long as you have the ability to scale it up, like the surrounded by enemies helm is wild. Like that is probably
hmm
that's another deepest tower scenario. Like
it is.
you basically 100% additional attack damage. That's an
And
insane
to be
boost.
clear, the item already existed. It was enabled by the new nodes that were added in 0.3 that made
Yeah,
it basically be the deepest tower.
yeah, exactly. So like, that stuff like that's really cool. Like, and that's and I'm sure there's other things in the game that are very similar to that that we haven't even found or realized yet. And that's the beauty of it. Like we look at like point one was very limiting, because not a lot was added. Point two got better, but not quite. Deepest Tower was very build enabling. Point three, we're starting to get a little wild. And point four, who the hell knows what we're going to get in point four, but it's going to be some crazy crap. But we're getting there. And I feel like over time, the metas will become less prevalent. And that same thing happened in PoE 1. Like over time, as the builds were established and the ascendancies are there, the metas became still meta, but not like the most played builds, and the blend of builds went down. I personally, I don't think Deadeye is that good of an ascendancy. Like damage, front load damage wise, yeah, it's great ascendancy, but it's not a very defensive ascendancy, and it's not one that I personally want to apply. So I don't think it's a good
Oh yeah,
ascendancy from my own opinion, because it's not
same.
defensive. I'm old. I'm
It
getting
is
old, and I'm
mathematically,
slow.
it's fast. Listen, if you want to know, if you don't mind dying, if you have good mechanical control, what is the best class to go fast and generate a lot of currency? Probably Deadeye,
Yeah.
sure. But like that doesn't mean it's the only good class or the only valid play style, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Far from it.
Tons of really interesting and cool and strong builds. They're not like S tier that like blast like that, but it depends on what you consider to be fun. And I feel like the rule of cool is one of the, like with
Yeah.
Warhammer, the rule of cool is something I apply. If the skill looks dope and it has a sick interaction, then I want to plays it. Um, Lightning Arrow just doesn't scratch that itch. You could play it and okay, yeah, you'll make a ton of currency, but is it worth doing that in an early access where it really means nothing? When you should be like
And
investing.
I do want to revisit for the perspective of players who are newer or less experienced or who have less time and stuff. I want to be clear that we're talking from the perspective of people who've made literally dozens of builds. And I think that if you are still learning the game, there is a lot to be said for
Mm,
playing a meta build. I actually endorse it in a lot of
yep.
cases because you are going to be learning so much about the game that having one element of it, like people often will shy away from build guides or meta builds or whatever because they're like, oh, I don't want things handed to me on a silver platter. I don't want to make the game too easy. That's not going to be a problem. If you are new, if you are less experienced, that's not going to be an issue for you. The build is just going to be one little thing that you're learning. And even if somebody's giving you a build guide, there are going to be things that you have to learn. Like, okay, they said that I have to go craft this and that I have to use something called like a preserved jawbone. What the hell? Like, you have to go figure that out. And like just taking one thing off your plate in terms of the build, totally reasonable. So I don't begrudge anybody at all
Mm,
who wants to play your PoE 1 Righteous Fire Pox build or your PoE 2 Lightning Arrow Dead. I think it's a totally legitimate decision. Our discussion is coming from a place of like we want to experiment, we want to experience cool things because like we've done that stuff. Like I've done that stuff. I just want to do something else. So.
yeah, exactly. Like learning how to make like the thing I hear from players that have never touched Path of Exiles, I want to make my own build. But like the thing that people need to understand is it is not a simple task to come up with a new mechanic. Like few of us have done it. I remember when I put pen to paper on VF totems in Path of Exile 1, right? And then someone figured out that ballista totem support worked on it, and it just got totally ridiculous. And then over the patches it got better and better, and then it got nerfed into oblivion. But like it's not the same as like it's different when you're an experienced player and you're applying game knowledge and then figuring out that well this is how I would approach it. But if you're fresh and you've never done anything in the game before, arguably there is an element of players that will figure it out natively, and more power to them. But there is a large amount of players that will have a bad experience trying to figure out a build. And we talk.
And I worry every time I say that, I worry that I'm coming across as saying like, oh, the smart ones will figure it out. Not
Not
necessarily.
necessarily.
Sometimes you just get lucky, pick the right skill or whatever. Because I don't want people to think, oh, if I can't do it with no game, if I can't do it like right off the bat in my first 100 hours, then I'm not smart. A lot of very, very smart people. Like, I'm not an idiot. I couldn't do it in my first 100 hours. I'm not a total moron. And like it's about the game knowledge. It's just you wouldn't try to write a really good novel if you hadn't read a lot of really good novels. Like you need the kind of baseline experience of playing a lot of builds to know what tools are in the toolbox and how you can apply things. It's just not easy to just memorize these
I,
things. A
I,
lot of it comes with experience.
I always called it failing upwards or failing forwards. So like the amount of, I've failed at more builds than I've been successful at. And I think that's a really important part because you then need to go, okay, why did my build fail? And you go dot dot dot. Okay, so how do I fix these problems? You do the research, you close the gaps, and you try again. And that's basically the constant progression. And sometimes you got to walk away off the game because you're like, this build sucks, like it's ruined my experience. The thing that sort of always aggrieves me has always been like league starter, like when someone does choose to follow a guide, it's when the guide is misleading on a league start scenario and like then someone gets a bad experience as a result of that guide. And I've seen many times where people have been like, this guide just totally misled me in the wrong direction and I have no idea what to do now because like my league starts screwed, and that's sort of the scenario where I'm like, yeah, it's not good. If you make the choice that you want to make a build yourself or figure out how something works, more power to you, do it, I would say. And you'll either be successful or you won't, but you'll definitely learn from it. We all have to start from somewhere. But yeah, like league starter guides should be relatively easy to approach, and that's where like my line's drawn. But that takes us to overall balance changes. Just to summarize everything we've been talking about, Baron. Did it hit the mark, or do you think that there was a lot left that we could have gotten with this patch?
I think the thing we knew from the moment they announced the details, it was a little disappointing that we didn't get a new class, but I feel like that's more of a feels thing. Like they made plenty of progress, and the game feels different, and the game feels better. Had I wished they had managed to get a new class in? Yes, but they will. So I hope we get two new classes, for the next batch or whatever. Um, Overall, I think it felt good. I think what they need to focus on, because I think a ton of the stuff we talked, skill gems feel good, story stuff feels good. I know that they're keeping grinding on the story. I know that they're keeping grinding on the classes. I don't even know if I need to mention those because like those are givens. Like we know that they're shooting to get those in. I feel like there's something that I have trouble putting my finger on, that I've read a lot of people's comments on this, and I just don't know if I can exactly place what's wrong with it. The end game progression feels a little hollow compared to PoE 1, and I'm not sure exactly which element of it is. Like, is it the fact that the mapping is endless, that you don't have that kind of sub goal of filling out your atlas? Like, I think one of the things that makes PoE 1 work is that there's all these kind of mutually overlapping goals, like so that you never kind of run out of goals. Like you're trying to fill out your atlas, and you're trying to get your Alice points by doing that. You're trying to do your build, you're trying to get your ascendancy and this and that. And like, I can't put my finger on it, but it just feels like I get to middle or end maps and I just kind of start, my mentality starts petering out towards mapping. I don't know what it is. I'm open to suggestions, but
It,
something about the end game progression, whether it's the towers, I don't know.
it's a combination of this is what I stitch it down to. So the towers are a big problem, and the reason why is PoE 1, you're given the option of which path you want to end game. So like in the context of PoE 2, right? So if you want to specialize in delirium, you put all your eggs in that basket. The problem is the all or nothing approach that they take with it. Whereas in PoE 1, you were given a choice, right? So you can go and specialize in delirium, right? But you can only do limited mechanics, but you could be proficient to an exceptionally level of efficiency in that mechanic, right? And then you could
Yeah,
really specialize, and the rewards would be increasing based on the investment that you put into that mechanic. In PoE 2,
yeah,
this is one of those like when you make it for everything, like everything is available equally, the value of everything is commensurately lower across the board for approaching it. So whereas like if you place more value into something and you make the investment more fruitful, then that one mechanic is going to be a rewarding outcome. That's what you're going to play because it gives you enjoyment. But right now, like you do rituals, delirium, everything across the board, it's all the same, and that just brings the overall quality of the end game down and makes it very generic, and that's one of the problems. The other problem is one hit pinnacle bosses. Like, this is where I disagree with one hit pinnacle bosses because I think your build should not be able to body a boss in like a third tier pinnacle boss. If you're one hitting that boss, what's the point? It trivializes the whole end game. That uber boss should be hard. Like, we think about PoE one, right? Yeah, builds are specifically made to Uber, but the average builder may
Yes.
not be. And this is the problem that they currently face with the end game, is the end game is so generic across the board, that they basically say all builds should be able to do all content. That reduces the meaningfulness of a build and what it's used for, and also it reduces the quality of the end game because the end game has to be homogeneously balanced. It can't be like extreme in this end and extreme in this end. I think when we see mechanics like Delve come into the game, this is when we'll start to see our divergence of how the game works. So it takes away the, like, front load damage stats mean nothing in a mechanic like Delve because you need defense, right? So mechanics need to have more of a unique identifier that separates them from other mechanics to actually go, okay, I need to adjust my build to be able to deal with this mechanic because otherwise I'll be unsuccessful at it. And I think that will eventually be where it'll dawn on them that maybe the existing Atlas tree gets scrapped from Path of Exile, and basically completing that goes the same way as Path of Exile 1, where you have one tree and you go into different points that give you different benefits, not separate mini trees. And I feel like that's the thing that screws the end game in PoE 1, PoE 2, sorry.
All points that I agree with, and I think it's a reasonable take that that might be what's contributing to my feel of the end game. The Atlas tree, man, it's and you know what? We haven't even had the Atlas tree in PoE one that long, but I remember thinking when they first introduced it, like this, there's no going back from this. Like this is huge. It was such a huge bonus to the end game, and yeah, just coming to PoE two, and it feels anemic. It feels like this weak, shriveled little thing by comparison. Like it's a few tiny little orbs of influence, and I feel little
Exactly.
agency.
It's gated behind superficial changes, right? Monster
Yeah,
level and then really generic changes that almost don't feel like they're very impactful. And if it's the concept of incentive, and it lacks incentive. That's the problem. Whereas
agreed.
PoE 1, there's like, you go, "Yeah, I want this point all the way up here, but I've got to go through this whole pathing tree to get there, right? To get the benefit from that point." So then you want to go through and you want to progress it because, like, you have to be able to achieve it. And that was the benefit of the PoE 1 mapping system, because you had all of that ability to be able to scale up. And I feel like this is where they're struggling with the PoE 2 endgame, because expanding it out once you get past the campaign, it's really just like quickly min max your build, get up to tier 3 bosses, Bob's your uncle, done, game over. um there isn't that pursuit of happiness like that PoE one's got, where you've got to individually
Um,
complete every map. That's the difference. There is a journey once you get to end game, and it's like you're playing the campaign again, because you've got to progress everything and complete it. And some people, they complete it within like 1 or 2 days. They would blast every map, but you were forced to play every single map. You weren't forced to play a map because it's on your path. You were forced to play literally every single map because there was an incentive to do so, and that's not what's in Path of Exile 2. And that's the problem. Like, it takes time, and as you progress that, then the rewards get better over that time, and to the point where you get to like end game, and then you're going, well, what mechanic do I want to be the best at? And then that's what you choose, and that's the difference.
Let me pose this to you. So I
Mm.
think two of the issues that we've raised uh, that are contributing to this kind of anemic feel, this kind of lackluster feel to the end game, are things that are related to each other and GG might be worried about. So both the complexity of the Atlas tree and that homogeneity you talk about, where the build that is good at blasting a map is also good at spiking down a boss in 2 seconds. I worry that both of those things might be slow to fix because they may not want necessarily to fully fix them. They might see that as new player unfriendly. They may say, well, new players want to be able to progress a build to the point where it can do everything. You and I disagree with that, obviously. You and I think that there should be some degree of build specialization, that you should be able to beat a pinnacle boss with many builds, but spike him down in 2 seconds, that's a different story. And you and I feel that the Alistair should. So how would you respond to GGG if because we don't know, but if their concern was we don't want to make it too new player unfriendly? How do you?
I think the biggest issue that they faced with this patch was the getting rid of the slog feel, right? So it's the opposite problem. The end game is the opposite problem as what they faced as the campaign, right? You actually probably spend more time in the campaign originally trying to get through it than what you were going to spend on a build in the end game min-maxing, right? That's, I think, the issue that they were addressing with point three. I don't for a second believe that they're not aware of the problems with the end game, and that comes from the fact that they piecemealed that together to get the point one patch out originally. I feel like the if I was in their position, right, making a choice between fixing the end game or fixing the overall game, the initial step up through the balance, I feel they made the right choice with what they did with point three, because that took away the animosity of running a new build and doing that every league, and you could take a weekend and get to maps, right? I feel like that was the right decision. And this came back to like many times I've made in many of my videos and whatnot over the last year, has been the game balance should have been the getting the feel of the game right was what needed to be the focus. And I feel like they're just about there. At like the game feels good, it's good to progress, you get through it at a pretty steady pace. You can like finish work at the end of the day and take 4 hours and get a good chunk of the campaign done before you tackle it the next night, which is really good. It's fun. I feel like this patch more so was that was the main focus, and basically for it'll be a continuation for Act Five and balancing that out. But now they're past that point. Now they know what the game should feel like, and they've got the feedback that people are providing about the feel of the game, void of the outliers and the radicals out there. Um, I feel now it's like, okay, we know what the game should be, right? The identity of the game is starting to formulate. Point three is the pitch change, and that's the identity of where they want the game to go. The community is responding positively to it. So aside from the tweaks to get it working better, now what does the end game look like? I feel like the end game is an open check right now. They haven't even really fleshed it out. I don't for a second think the end game we have right now will be the actual end game in the very end of when 1.0 comes out. I feel like there will be a
I don't
massive.
know, man. I want to think that, and I think that they may think that, but this feels to me, having worked on some projects before, I know you have too, this feels like the sort of thing that could easily be pushed as just put off again and again as good enough for now, good enough for now. We make tweaks to it, we make tweaks to it. This was the problem that happened on release or on open access release, where they had been iterating on stuff like flasks, on
Yeah.
stuff like the gem changes over and over again up until the moment they released in December of that year. And then suddenly everything was frozen in place. They said, all right, we've got something there, and we need to focus on putting out these other fires rather than
Yeah.
reworking whole systems when we've got at least a thing. And I worry that the mapping system could be enough of a thing that they don't feel a super drive incentive to iterate on it, to go back to the drawing board. Even like, imagine going back to the drawing board at this point. I don't know. That might be the sort of thing that comes with like a major expansion down the road, where they say like, let's at least get to release, and then maybe the first major expansion will do an endgame overhaul or something.
Yeah, it could be. It could also be the same scenario as the gem system, where they walk back their entire design philosophy and basically go, maybe we got to overhaul it and make it a bit more similar to the original game to get the quality out of it.
I would still say honestly, they've stayed true to their PoE2 design decision for gems for the most part. Like, they've made tweaks and adjustments, but like, if you ask me, is the zero point 0.3 version of gems closer to zero point 0.1 or to Path of Exile 1? It's way closer to 0point 0.1. Like, it's still
Oh yeah,
recognizably a PoE2 gem system.
yeah,
They've just, iterated. They've
yeah,
made the
exactly.
changes.
I think I think 1.0 will be an interesting tell as to where they get to. I think we'll continue to see iteration. Like this game isn't gonna fully launch until probably the end of next year. Let's be real about it right now. I don't see it
Unless they
ending.
really cut corners and say we're going to launch with like 4 missing classes or something. Like, yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it.
I don't think that, like, they said, was it by this Christmas it was supposed to be fully released. I think like
I don't know,
the
man.
the problem is like over promise and under deliver is seems to be the key issue up until recent. And even now, like they're sort of getting back on track, but yeah, they sort of fell off the wagon for a lot of this year with this one, in particular with the damage to POE one and whatnot too. And they pulled that back on course correction now, like they're back on track. But I don't know what to expect for the 1.0. I just know it's not coming anytime soon. But just have to enjoy what we get every 3 months, and then yeah,
If they hold themselves to that Christmas deadline, if it is coming soon, then it's not. It's just going to be another iteration. It's not going to be a big launch. The big deal will be getting it out there and getting more players in, because I think a lot of people who might try the game will be way more inclined to when it's free.
yeah,
But
exactly, and that'll be the real tell. But also it'll be when revenue starts to dry down a bit as well, and that's going to be a little problematic for them. So we'll see how things sort of play out over time. But yeah. Anyway, I think that gets us to the end of our series of questions. We covered off on a fair bit with this one.
we did.
Yeah, I think overall it's good feel, positive feel. A few nuances here or there that I'm sure they'll look at over time. But yeah,
This is a good example of a patch for them. Even the bits that I'm not super thrilled with, I think they're heading in the right direction.
yeah, I think they really change pitch in the right point, and they continue like this. I'm more inclined to play this as a main game now because I see the potential that I couldn't see previously. But
I'm not there quite yet, but I could see where I would be in the future. I'm still in PoE one mode as my main, but I could see it in the future.
yeah,
So
exactly. The
here's
hope is
hoping.
there. This was what I was hoping point one would have released as, and we just got it much later down the track. Anyway, yeah, thanks for joining me for another Coffee and Chaos podcast, Baron.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for
Um,
having me.
for anyone watching, don't forget to like and sub to Baron. Don't forget to like and sub to me. And we will see you guys in the next one, which will be a little delayed because Baron's got a few things going on, good things. And yeah, we'll see you guys then.
Cheers. Take it easy.
Have a good one.